I'm laying in bed and my body starts shaking. I'm physically shaking. And I had to talk myself off the ledge. I had to tell myself, you are safe. Is therapy the only way that people can actually get relief and learn tools to handle their trauma?
Most of us are not taught how to feel feelings. A lot of us grow up without really understanding what we're feeling inside and how it relates to what we're experiencing. You don't have to go to therapy just to be able to do all the work, but you do need to understand how to do these things that I just mentioned to be able to process the trauma. Trauma is not necessarily this bad thing that happened to you, it's how we respond to the thing.
I'm hesitant to say that therapy is the only way. If there's a big sense of feeling isolated or as if you don't belong, if there's, an escalated sense of unhelpful coping mechanisms, those can all be, I think, results of unhealed trauma. Therapy really would be advised.
In the recent past, I realized, holy crap, I've been doing this thing forever. This is because of the relationship that my parents had. Why the hell didn't I figure this out 30 years ago? I could have saved myself so many problems, right? But I don't think I'm alone. I think that people often seek out the dynamic of a relationship that feels familiar and comfortable, but may not be good for them at all.
Welcome to Drinks with the Girls. Conversations for women over 40 around connection, change, and the power of female friendship. Living well with stories to tell. I'm Karen, and this is Lisa.
We are moms and solopreneurs stepping into our own, diving into real conversations about things that matter to women in midlife.
We're here to spill the tea on everything that affects women in their 40s and beyond. Topics like loss and grief, changing relationships, launching kids, menopause, and reinventing ourselves in midlife. We are here to tackle it all.
Connect with us through a blend of our lived experiences, our friendship, the memory of our moms, plus a collection of real stories, honest conversations, and engaging interviews that will make women over 40 feel seen and remind them that they're not alone on this journey called life. Let's go.
Welcome back to another episode of Drinks with the Girls. This episode has been a long time coming for me because we have our two resident experts on trauma here today, Alex and Alyssa, and I'm going to let them introduce themselves. Today, we're going to talk about trauma and how it might show up in your relationships, because I know it does. But before we get going, I'm going to let you know what I'm drinking. I am drinking Wild Wonder prebiotic, probiotic, sparkling drink in guava rose flavor.
It's so pretty. That's why you tell the truth. That's why you got it.
Yes. No,
I know you so well.
Yes. When I buy wines, when I buy anything, I always go for the labels. And it's the little tagline is happy gut, happy life.
Would that were true.
Mm-hmm.
That it would be that easy.
Oh. Whoa. That's very guava-y. Okay.
Oh. I always thought guava was kind of a subtle flavor, not so much.
Oh. What are you drinking?
Alrighty then. I am drinking, and I think you drunk this before a couple episodes ago, but this was our first listener sent drink. So I'm drinking a Simply Pop pineapple mango prebiotic soda, and it is yummy. It's really good. So thank you to listener Cynthia for that. We love you. Send us drinks, not alcohol. Well, yeah. Let's see. On my Brady Bunch left is Alyssa. Alyssa, you want to introduce yourself?
Hi, my name's Alyssa Scarano, and I'm a licensed professional counselor, and I am the founder and clinical director of the Collective Therapy and Wellness, and I'm so happy to be here.
What are you drinking, love?
I'm going to be a little boring today. I forgot to go get a drink, so I have a water right here that I've been drinking for the last few hours.
Well, last time, it's like, 8 o'clock on the East Coast? You were drinking coffee, caffeinated coffee or something crazy like that, and we were like, girl, what is going on?
Well, yeah, because, it is. It's 8 o'clock here. And I remember that day, and I had such a long day. Mondays are a long day for me. So I was like, if I'm going to do this, I need some caffeine injected into my eyeballs. But all I could get was a cup of coffee.
We were impressed. All right, Miss Alex, on my Brady Bunch bottom, I guess one would say.
Yeah. Hi. Well, let's see. My name is Alex Casillas. I'm a licensed clinical social worker in Eugene, Oregon. I mostly work with BIPOC folks. Yeah, trauma is definitely something that comes up a lot, and I feel like that's something that is turning definitely into a specialty, whether I want to or not. And I actually do enjoy it, so I guess I do want to turn into a specialty.
Yeah.
I am drinking. I don't know if I'm pronouncing this right. Hayo. It's organic peach mango social tonic. It's non-alcoholic.
Ooh,
See it.
pretty label.
Um,
See? We always got to
has
have that.
adaptogens and natural nootropics and functional botanicals to celebrate life. So
How
I
do,
don't know.
how do we not have drink sponsors on this podcast? I swear to God, it's like,
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, because nobody has time to go knocking on doors to find them.
well, yeah. I was
So if
hoping they'd
anybody's
find
looking-
us.
If anybody's looking to intern with Drinks with the Girls to work on that for us, we'll take you.
Please, and thank you. So, from drinks to trauma. So, y'all have some trauma because our third most highly rated episode was one of these folks. I can't remember which one of these fabulous women on here. And so we were like, okay, we need to talk more about that. So we thought we would focus on trauma and relationships. So let's see. Karen, where do you want to start? There's so much to dive into. I don't even know where to start.
Well, I want to recommend that listeners, if they haven't heard the episodes we did with
Yeah,
Alyssa
good
and
point.
Alex, maybe go back and listen to those because on both episodes, we really dove in deep and really learned, what trauma is, how it might pop up in our lives, things we can do. Because this episode today is going to specifically, well, at least we're going to start out specifically focusing on how it might show up in your relationships. And I want to make sure that we kind of normalize the fact we all have trauma on some level, big, small, somewhere in the middle, and that it's okay. Like it's not anything to be ashamed of. It's not something that we're going to hide. We're going to, like what we like to do on Drinks the Girls, we're going to bring it out into the light. We're going to talk about it amongst our besties in a safe place so then we can, learn some things and maybe get some tools. Maybe if each of you could just give a little snippet synopsis of what trauma looks like and how it might appear in either a romantic relationship or a friendship or maybe a relationship with family, a work relationship, you choose the relationship. Alex, do you want to start?
Sure. That's a good question. So what trauma looks like, I mean, are you asking like how like how people express it or like how people deal with it? I mean,
Like how would they express it? Yeah.
yeah, it really depends. I mean, what I usually see, like if somebody gets triggered is, they have a physiological response to it. So it looks like the person experiencing whatever it was that traumatized them to begin with, like they feel like they're experiencing it all over again. So it could be anywhere from like, feeling like your heart's pounding, similar to a panic attack, I guess, but not necessarily quite that all the times. So it depends. It depends on the trauma. But I would say with relationships, I mean, trust is usually the big one. When you have trauma, especially early on, like having trust is difficult to, I guess, to feel or to obtain with your partner. So that is something that usually comes up a lot in relationships, like trust issues, communication. Sometimes, not being able to really verbalize what you're experiencing cause a lot of strain, especially because, if someone doesn't know that this is triggering, how are they going to know not to do that, you know? And being able to understand that it's not that they're trying to hurt you, but sometimes people do innocent things that you're triggered by, right? So that's another one that I see a lot. But also like recognizing like our own patterns, like we end up learning ways to cope with our trauma. So we sometimes develop patterns that are not necessarily super healthy, but at the time that we did, they were helping us cope with what happened. So, you know, I tell clients that we need to update the software. It's outdated. It's not necessarily a bad thing. Like when we did do these things, they were helping, but not necessarily anymore. And so that can get in between a relationship. So I don't know. There's so many different things, but those are the ones that are popping in my head right now.
Alyssa, what do you think?
Yeah, so I think kind of going back a little bit, to refresh, I mean, trauma is really anything that rewires the brain, right? In terms of understanding ourselves and the world, something, feels unsafe, right? And keeps the body in a state of stress response. And sometimes these like vulnerabilities for trauma can begin in childhood, in the early formative years of forming attachment styles. And we, as Alex was saying, is that we tend to learn ways to cope with our environment, right? Or to survive our family of origin or the environment that we're in as a kid. And those survival mechanisms are often a matter of like who we need to be in the environment, how we need to act, or how we need to behave in order to be accepted or safe or feel a sense of belonging or love. And so that can look like a lot of different behaviors in relationships. And so outwardly it may look like conflict avoidance, it may look like performing, right? Putting a mask on for who you really are. It may look like making yourself smaller or being a good boy or a good girl. And it can also be, pleasing others and self-sacrificing. And, that's all sometimes like the outward things that you might see. But internally, as Alex was saying, yeah, there's a sense of a stress response. And the interesting thing is that, especially in relationships, because we're in relationships from the time that we're little and all throughout our lives, we don't necessarily recognize that what we're feeling is a stress response. It just feels like normal in a way because, oh, well, I get anxious communicating or I don't like conflict. So it's uncomfortable, right? We're easily able to like dismiss these things and not realize that, oh, actually, there's a vulnerability here, right? And I'm acting from a state of survival or trauma from childhood that I didn't know was actually a thing. And so internally you might be feeling, yeah, your heart racing, pressure in the chest, you can't catch your breath. It could also be, it doesn't even have to be that, pronounced. It could be a sense of containment or suppression or shutdown, or even a sense of like, all right, I'm done with this conversation. I've checked out already. You know, ultimately there's a sense of I don't feel safe in this scenario, not necessarily out of imminent risk or harm, like I'm going to be hurt physically in some way, but just I don't feel safe to be vulnerable right now and tell you what's going on for me.
Okay, so I have a question. We're talking about like what it looks like on the outside. So, in doing some research for this episode, I did what any professional would do, and I put on some Grey's Anatomy episodes. And I was watching this one episode, and they were talking about EMDR, which I'm a big fan of. And without like diving into that dumpster fire in terms of there's a lot to it, right? It's a modality that therapists use for trauma. But this particular episode was talking about that, and I'm curious about how does it show up in the body? Because in this particular episode, the therapist was explaining how trauma can show up in the body. The character was like, I don't understand, why I'm having this trauma response. It looks different than blah, blah, blah. And she's like, yeah, but your body doesn't know that. And so I can't remember. There's a famous book. Is it The Body Keeps Score? Is that the name of the book? I'll put that in the show notes. So that's one thing I always wondered about. Like I've noticed with my daughter when she's having trauma responses, it's definitely like, for her, it shows up as like, well, you're coming toward me. So I have to react to that. And we're like 10 feet away from you. So I'm just curious in terms of, this part when we're describing what this looks like, talk to me about how it shows up in the body and what that can look like. Alex, you want to start?
So it's interesting because so Alyssa was talking about like things that we experience, especially when we're young, right? So I remember not long ago, maybe 5 years ago or so, somebody was complimenting me on something. And I just felt like I needed to run. My feet, like I couldn't move them. They were like stuck, but at the same time they wanted to run. And, it took me a second to realize that was like a trauma response, that apparently I don't like it when people compliment me and it like just it just does not feel good, feels unsafe. So I wanted to run away from it. So, I hear that a lot from clients, like my feet will feel like they want to run. I feel a knot in my throat, right? My tension in my shoulders, or like tightness in my chest, or my stomach feels like is not happy, like there are a lot of like what you would call like physiological symptoms, right? But is that somatization of the trauma, right? You're feeling it in your body because that's where it was trapped. And what EMDR does, and I'm not going to go into it, is it's just trying to resolve that, right? To give the mind some time to connect with that piece of the body to figure it out, I guess, in a simple way of putting it. But yeah, like a lot of folks will feel these things and they don't recognize it as like, oh, this is because of this time when I was like blah blah blah. You know, we just react because that's how we kept safe. So, you know, what I learned from, because this happened at a time when I really understood trauma a lot better. What I learned was that I needed to process that, and I needed to kind of get to the bottom of like why I felt like running when someone was actually giving me a compliment. And, obviously I talked to my therapist and I did my thing. But when we feel those things strongly, especially in situations that are not threatening, that's something to kind of go like, huh, I wonder why that is.
Okay. Alyssa, what about you?
Yeah, the mind body connection it's so profound. And if you really think about it, I mean, we all can relate to this, I think, on a personal level when if you've gone to therapy and you've gained some insight about yourself and you never necessarily, knew that thing, right, about yourself, or, oh, I connected it all the way back to like something that happened 2 years ago. Why do I do that? Right. Like we all have those moments in daily life, even if it's not in therapy, but in daily life, we didn't see that one piece of our day, like what it meant to us until we slowed down, right? Or we have an oversight somewhere, right? Because we move so fast throughout life. But the interesting piece of this is like you look back at our lives, there are so many points where we didn't necessarily have the language to describe our experience. So we just had our physical connection to our body, right?
Mm.
So if you didn't have the language to process whatever it was that you were experiencing because the mind didn't connect the emotion to like the label, oh, that's what anger feels like, or oh, that's what it feels like to feel devastated or disappointed. You just have the physical reaction of the emotion and not able to connect it to what happened. You're just feeling it so intensely, right? And I think part of it too is like that's even why I think all of us tend to push away emotions at times because they feel so profound or sometimes overwhelming and we don't have the language to describe what's happening. So instead, it's just stored. It doesn't just go away. That's a belief that we have, or sometimes a wish that, oh, well, I've had some space and time from the scenario and I'm over it now. Well, what got you over it? What made it go away? Right? If you didn't talk about it or you didn't sit with it for a minute or there was no repair. And that's really what we talk about with trauma is this event happened or events over time that there was no processing, there was no sitting with it. It was overwhelming to the nervous system and there was no support afterward. And so you might have gotten space from it and it may not be relevant at the time until something happens and it pops up and you feel that same sense of nervous system regulation dysregulation that you did initially or all those other times before that you were in a similar triggering situation or activating situation. And it truly becomes like a feedback loop, in the sense of sometimes it could be the situation that triggers a trauma or activates the nervous system. It could be a thought, right, that brings you right back. But it also could be just the body's response in the sense of I feel my heart racing, I feel out of breath, I feel pressure in the chest. And I don't know why. I can't tell you how many clients, and Alex, you could probably speak to this too, is like, I got really anxious, but there was no reason for me to be anxious, right? Or I don't know why I'm feeling this way. There's no reason at all. There's always a reason. Something activated your nervous system. And what was that? Right. And so it's slowing down and giving someone time to process what was going on in your body, what brought that feeling or sensation about? Well, and then were there any thoughts associated with it or memories? Or was there another time in the past where you experienced that prior? And part of, I think, therapy when you're doing trauma processing, you're having the experience of building tolerance with the discomfort, working through the nervous system dysregulation with support, with somebody sitting with you, whether it's through a screen or in the same room, and, modeling groundedness, modeling empathy so that you can develop empathy for yourself. But the thing is that it's a feedback loop in the sense of the heart rate, increased heart rate can make it harder to breathe, right? And now it's harder to breathe, and now my thoughts are activated, and oh my gosh, I need to run away, or I need to fight, or it's time to shut down, right? And it kind of just can become cyclical in that way.
Hey there, I'm Lisa Corachella McDowell, your midlife Pacific Northwest princess, here to guide you in the art of next leveling your life. I'm passionate about women's health and wellness in midlife, especially for moms parenting kids with unique needs like I do. I truly believe we can learn, grow, advocate, and care for the planet while taking care of ourselves and our families. And I'd love to help you do the same. And I'm beyond excited to tell you about my membership for maxed out mamas just like me, the Empowered Parent Collective. It's a space for parents to confidently advocate for their kids, build inclusive communities, educate themselves, and find balance and support along the way. To find out more about the Empowered Parent Collective, my classes, wellness offerings, parenting tips, advocacy resources, and exclusive Drinks with the Girls goodies, head to nextlevellifewithlisa.com. Let's survive and thrive in the messy middle together.
I just had this experience recently, and it's like my body. I received a text from somebody, and I don't want to get into it, but it was. I knew the result of this text was going to be a conflict, and I received this text, and I'm laying in bed, and my body starts shaking, and like my stomach's like I'm physically shaking. And it's like I had to talk myself off the ledge because I had to reread the text. And the text, if you just read it, it's very benign, even though I knew kind of what was underneath it. And that's what I think was activating me. And for me, I grew up, you don't do conflict. Conflict is scary. You don't do it, period. So I kind of know what it was about, but I had to tell myself, you are safe. This is fine. You will handle this. It will be okay. But it's amazing how it can show up when you're not expecting. It's like it can really take you by surprise. And I guess my question for both of you is, if people haven't been in therapy, like, is therapy the only way to really look at this and really, kind of move through it? Because I've been in therapy, I've done coaching, I've kind of looked at things. I think I might need to go back, but is therapy the only way that people can actually get relief and learn tools to handle their trauma?
I personally don't think so. But I do want to say something that I think is important. Most of us are not taught how to feel feelings. So a lot of us grow up without really understanding what we're feeling inside and how it, relates to what we're experiencing. So we're not taught the language. We're definitely not taught how to sit with it. And we definitely are not taught how to like self-regulate or co-regulate with somebody else. So, I mean, yeah, you don't have to go to therapy just to be able to do all the, to do the work. But you do need to understand how to do these things that I just mentioned to be able to process like the trauma, because it's not, it's there because we weren't able to do those things when they happened, right? Like, because trauma is not necessarily this bad thing that happened to you, it's how we respond to the thing. Because you have two people that can experience the same thing, but one of them has all these great skills and they'll just walk away and be fine. And others get stuck with it for who knows how long, right? So being able to sit with what's happening in a safe space, because usually when something like that happens, you're not safe. So what you were saying to yourself, like, I'm safe, like, that's super important. It's a big piece of it. And we're social beings, so like it is important to have like a witness, to what we're going through so that we can like co-regulate with them. I think the reason why therapy is, you know, so great, or at least I think it's great, is because it gives people an opportunity to be with someone that they trust, that's safe, that's able to like guide them through these big feelings and big sensations that they're experiencing, so that they can like safely make sense of all of this and be able to like grow from it, because it is to a certain extent like creating tolerance towards these emotions, these sensations that you're experiencing, and knowing that, look, oh wait, I'm not going to die, right? Like I can sit with this and I'll be okay. And and like I said, a lot of us are not taught that from an early age. A lot of us are shamed, because we have feelings when we're kids, or, we're told to suppress them. So when we experience them, that's why a lot of folks have a hard time, because they've never had the safe experience of like being okay with all these things. And so that's, if you can find that, whether it is with a friend or through religion, or, there's many different things that you can do to process trauma. I do believe that there's a physical component to it, so that you do have to release that from your body, but it doesn't necessarily have to be with therapy. I mean, yeah, you can do it many different ways as long as certain elements are present. And I think one of the most basic ones is definitely safety, because if you're not safe, then, you can't really process all this stuff.
I don't know. I'm hesitant to say that therapy is the only way, but I also feel the need to put like an asterisk here. It's like, I think depending on what we're talking about trauma wise, right? Like if there was significant childhood trauma, right? And, functioning in daily life or in relationships across domains, whether that's at work, romantic relationships, relationships with your children, with your family. I mean, if there's a big sense of feeling isolated or as if you don't belong, if there's, an escalated sense of like unhelpful coping mechanisms, those can all be, I think, results of unhealed trauma. Though that is going to be where I would say like therapy really would be advised, right? Because the coping is so maybe unhelpful and it's leading to other problems, right? Or even here's another way of looking at it is that if you notice that you're just maybe stuck in relationship patterns that just won't like every relationship that I'm in, I feel this way, right? I feel like I'm not good enough. I feel shame. I feel like I don't belong. And it's a sense of like, almost like being recreated, right? That's something that I would say highly advisable to seek out support with because that can be unrelenting, right? And it can feel really lonely. And there are individuals, people in the world who have had significant repetitive, instances of abandonment or rejection, throughout development or throughout life. And therapy can truly be very reparative in providing you an alternative experience of what it feels like to be with somebody else who's in support of you when you're struggling, that you might not have had that experience ever, right? And therapy can be actually anecdote for that. So I think depending on the level of what you're struggling with, right? But yeah, I mean, I would say there are other things for sure. I mean, something that if we're going to be incorporating the body, anything with exercise, anything that gets your body moving, you're going to be forced to kind of be in your body. And when you have like almost a distraction, like a physical exercise, you're focused on the discomfort of lifting the weight or being in the yoga pose, right? So there's a sense of I'm going to be in my body, but focused on this other task that is, being asked of me. So I'm building tolerance for that discomfort in the moment. There's sensation coming up, but I have control over what I do with my body. That in and of itself can really provide a sense of like personal power or control over what you're feeling internally. So, I mean, and yoga, I can give you a really great breakdown if you wanted of like how yoga you can kind of use yoga as a way to describe like see that for yourself. But I don't want to necessarily take up too much time with that answer. But I think exercise, running, yoga, whatever your, choice is, but something with the body, right? Now, if exercise is not your thing, because sometimes it's not, like ultimately, if there's anything that you enjoy doing, gardening, right? Where you're physically active, like gardening or working with your hands or doing work around your house. Anything that you have to be in your body for, whether it's painting or creating art, like you are physically in your body when you're doing those activities. Those things can be really healing when discomfort comes up if you're breathing through it, right? And practicing, being present. Those are all skills though too. And there's different avenues to practice mindfulness or work through discomfort no matter what activity that you're engaging with in your body in the moment.
So I want to go back to something you said about when you're in a pattern with relationships, because, well, for me personally, right, in the recent past, I realized, holy crap, I've been doing this thing forever. And long story short, basically, this is because of the relationship that my parents had, right? I was like, why the hell didn't I figure this out 30 years ago? I could have saved myself so many problems, right? But I don't think I'm alone. I think that people often seek out the dynamic of a relationship that feels familiar and comfortable, but may not be good for them at all. So can you say a little bit about that? Because I think people who haven't experienced that or don't know what that is, maybe like, well, of course, if it's familiar and comfortable, like, yeah, go for it. Talk a little bit about that. Alex, can you start?
Yeah. So that's definitely a pattern that I see a lot, actually. And I do want to distinguish that it's because I mean I hear people say like, "Are you self-sabotaging?" I don't think that that's the case. I think that's more just like this is what I know, right? So we do what we know. I don't think people are trying to self-sabotage, at least not in that specific scenario. But I mean, it's kind of our way to try to like make sense of what happened to us, from this vantage point now that we're older. I think that's why we repeat some of these patterns because it's our way of trying to kind of resolve the thing that was not resolved, right? So we repeat that to try to get it right. And unfortunately, I mean, that's not something that happens all the time. Sometimes it does help to, you do get to resolve that. And I'm thinking about myself specifically in this situation, like with my trust issues, like I've resolved them for the most part through relationships with other people, with friends and like my partner. Like that's how I've resolved a lot of my trust issues because they were able to like show up. And so instead of repeating that pattern that I had in the past of like being around people that were not trustworthy, right? I was able to break it through the relationship. But, you do get it took me a long time to get to that place. Before that, there was relationships that kept proving to me that I shouldn't trust people, you know? And it was a long time before I was able to find like how to break that and then reinforce a new pattern, right? So it is very common for us to try to make sense of it with through relationships, like how these things happen to us and try to kind of resolve it. And I wanna make sure that people know that, not to feel shamed about it or feel like they're doing anything wrong. Like, it is our way of trying to make sense. And like I said from the beginning, like, we're not taught a lot of this emotional language, a lot of these skill sets early on, so we do the best we can, and sometimes it's repeating patterns, to try to make sense, to try to kinda come out the other end where things are actually working now as opposed to being disappointed or hurt over and over.
Alyssa, what do you think?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I'm sitting here. I'm like, there's a bunch of reasons. you know,
Yeah.
yes, recreation. It can happen out of, well, this is what I know. This is what's familiar, although it's not comfortable. If you really, really think about it, if you look at your family dynamic, right? Like I can tell you for self disclosure, I tend to overfunction just like my mom did, right? And it's interesting because while that was my norm growing up, it's also not comfortable for me at all, right? It's uncomfortable for me to slow down and delegate. It takes more effort and energy for me to realize like, oh, this is something I can hand off, right? But it's also not comfortable because I'm drained, I'm tired, I'm burnt out, right? I want help. I can recognize that, but I don't necessarily remember, oh, I can ask for help, right? So, yeah, some of it is because I think of social learning, like this is what we saw women do, right? Growing up, this is what was expected of me, this is what my mom did. There's also the aspect of trying, yes, to resolve a relationship rupture that maybe happened in the past, almost like, but it's unconscious. So I can give you an example that I think can really break it down. It's like, say that we're talking about some, like, if for an example, maybe you had a rupture in your relationship with your father, right? And the family broke apart and you go on throughout the rest of your life, really don't have an estranged relationship with your father, but then you go on and you get married, right? And go on and become a mother and a wife, and you're building your life for yourself. But all of a sudden, certain behavior dynamics that happened in your childhood growing up start to happen in your marriage. There's a sense of maybe not trusting your spouse because they dropped the ball, or you feel like you can't count on them, or the mental or physical load is not even, and we're not talking about it. All of a sudden, right, your spouse maybe starts to fill in the relationship dynamic that you once had with your dad, right? And part of that is, sure, we could say it's there's two people in the picture, absolutely, right? We're triggering each other. I'm acting out of a survival instinct and I'm pulling away and I'm not, communicating my concerns or my feelings because I can't rely on you. And in that sense, here I am in a relationship that I witnessed growing up and never really resolved or repaired. And I see it being played out right in front of me. It brings up all of those things that you once had with your father, except in the current day, right? The person is different, the experience is different, but the core feelings are the same. But there's another one too where there's sometimes it's almost like recreated out of a sense of wanting to fulfill a wish for closeness that was never there or once there but broke. Does that make sense? That one I can give an example of, but that is also another reason sometimes why patterns are recreated.
So we have two people who get together and they're either recreating what they know, or they're, they're attracted to what's familiar, even if it's dysfunctional. So how do couples navigate that? Like if they're both just responding to each, to how they're being triggered.
Yeah.
Wait, does that make sense? If they're both just responding in the relationship to their triggers, how can anybody have a happy happy partnership?
Where's the happy ending?
Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, if you think about it, right, if when there's conflict or divide or disconnection, are you responding out of a place of reactivity? Right? That reactivity, what am I doing in there? Is it helpful to the dynamic, or is it ultimately just causing further divide, right? Are we seeking to repair and communicate and establish closeness and solve the problem? Or are you the enemy and now I'm off and I'm by myself? So I think these things are going to happen. We're always going to come to the table with our own individual stuff. Everybody has vulnerabilities from childhood that either made, caused a trauma later or, made you susceptible to potentially experiencing trauma at some point. So no one is immune from these types of, scenarios that can happen, but how are we reacting to them? Are we reacting to them in, ways that feel like out of need or survival, or does it feel like a conscious choice to sit and express how I feel?
My name is Karen Shatafian, and I am a shameless coffee addict and empowerment coach for women, and my love language is authenticity. My mission is helping women unapologetically design a life they're in love with. Because what the hell are we waiting for? My website, KarenShatafian.com, has all my coaching packages and free offers like my Midlife Reclamation Guide. In it, you'll find tools to help you decide how to create the most inspired and empowered version of yourself and your life. You can find me on Facebook and Instagram talking about ways women can show up for themselves after decades of showing up for everyone else. Join me as we throw off the shackles and live our best freaking lives. See the show notes for all the details. Cheers.
And I would say that self-awareness and then choosing to do not the same thing, right? Something different. And, that's why I was bringing up of like, before I've always had trust issues, but before they started to get better, right? I had to recognize that I was picking these patterns, right? That I was picking people to prove me right, that I couldn't trust you. And it wasn't until I kind of took a different way, right? Chose different people, set up better boundaries, and was able to communicate a lot better and understood that I was doing that, that I was able to kind of break that pattern and create a safer environment for myself and better relationships. And now I'm even able to like say things like, oh, okay, that was triggering to me. I need to work on that, like, and express like, hey, yeah, that was triggering, but it's not your fault because, how would you know that that would be triggering? I need to work on my thing. It's not easy to get to that place. It takes a lot of work and self-awareness, but it's possible. And I don't know, I always like to extend that compassion to people of like, you know, mm, all of us are a work in progress. It's okay to feel these things. It's okay to experience these things. You're not wrong. There's nothing wrong with you. Like, we are the products of what we have lived through. And, the fact that you're here and that you wake up every morning and you keep trying to have a good relationship with whoever you're with or friends or whatever, that tells me that, that you want to get better, that you want to heal, that you're valuable. Like this is not a bad thing. Like, it always saddens me when I hear people say like, that they feel like there's something wrong with them. And I don't like to hear that because it's okay for us to have certain things that we need to work at. Trauma can be obviously not good, but there's also what we usually don't talk about, which is the other side of trauma, the resilience piece, and that we grow from the bad things that happen to us, and we can be kinder and more empathetic because of it. Like we don't usually talk about that side. And I want to just let folks know that, yeah, we're not just that bad thing that happened or how we coped in a way that's not very helpful, but we're also the other side, like what we gain from that, like the beautiful skill sets that we got from that because we had to survive something that wasn't great.
Yeah. And it can be empowering, right? Because with that insight, it's like, oh, I can make a different choice. I'm no longer in that scenario where I had no control and I had no support or I had no voice or I had to be something different. Like now with this insight and recognizing where all of this came from, I can make choices that are more aligned with my needs, with my wants, and I'm in control of my life as opposed to being, someone that's witnessing it.
Yeah. And one more thing to note is that I usually see people reaching out to therapy when they are that other side, right? When they've already survived and they're actually doing fairly well, but they're noticing like these patterns and these coping mechanisms that no longer work. That's when they reach out for help because they've survived, because they've done so well.
We're talking about a lot of complicated stuff, right? It's not like you're going to go into a therapist and like in 3 sessions you're fixed. But what this reminds me of is, without getting into my situation specifically, but Alex obviously knows my family really well. So my husband had a lot of really serious trauma when he was growing up, and that's affected him in a lot of ways. He's got some other issues physically that kind of weigh into it. And I say this because it's taken me a long time to understand when he is triggering in terms of like, he's left the building, right? Elvis has left the building. And it took me a long time to understand that's not him right there. That is not him. And he is thinking, I'm not me, right? Like this is a conversation that's not happening now. This is like happening in the past. And so I'm better at recognizing it 20 years later, but I'm not going to say that I'm like, oh, that's what's going on. So I'm wondering if you can, I get that I'm way oversimplifying this because people can be at different points in like dealing with their trauma journey and still be in a successful relationship or not, right? It runs the gamut. So I'm wondering if you guys can speak to kind of like, what are some signs that that's happening with your partner and you need to be like, I need to get out of this conversation right now, right? So not so much like, oh, change your relationship, like big thing, but just like, I notice when this happens, my partner reacts this way and that doesn't feel really good. And I need to know when to be like, you know what, we're going to finish this later and maybe like talk about what are some good ways to kind of do that to just kind of back yourself out of the situation. Because I find when that happens, like there's no talking to someone that's triggered like that. You cannot like talk your way out of it, explain your way out of it, like bring them back in my experience at least. And so I've found what I have to do is just take myself out of the picture. So I know I'm generalizing a lot, but maybe you guys can kind of give people some hints. Like I had to hesitate to say a cheat sheet, but like what's a sign that that's happening? How can you kind of extricate yourself from that kind of a conversation? And what are some healthy ways to kind of start reestablishing a healthier boundary?
I mean, I can tell you from like, once again, personal experience, right? When I get triggered, it's not me anymore. It's whatever I need to do to feel safe. So, when I see somebody get triggered, I can pick up on the fact that they're not themselves. They're not their baseline, I guess. Like you can sense that there's something off. Sometimes like you can actually feel that energy like emanating towards you because it's that intense. And, you're right. Like, I mean, everybody's different. I think that some folks you can engage, when they're triggered, but it really just depends on what it is and the level of trigger, I guess. If it's somebody that you can engage with, I would say, you know, trying to co-regulate with them would be good. Trying to be calm, but not say like be calm, right? Because that's usually does not work. You can't tell
No.
someone to calm. Please don't do that. But just being in a calm way, right? And letting them know, like, hey, do you need to sit down? Would you like some water? And just like, I'm here. That can be helpful. But if it's something that you can see that they need extra attention, yeah, maybe walking away. I like to tell folks, like, make plans with folks. Like, when I get triggered, I usually need fill in the blank. Like for me, going for walks is really helpful. Like if I get really triggered, especially like very angry, like I like to angry walk, because it helps me get a lot of that energy out. So especially if you're in a partnership, like trying to figure out what works for them, and beforehand is important. Because obviously when it's happening, you can't that's not going to work. So having a plan. But I would say, like, just acknowledging that, like, that's not the person that I usually interact with. Like, I mean, you could see them and it looks like them, but they're going through a reaction that they don't have a lot of control of. So how can I be helpful? And like having, once again, those conversations prior to that can help. I have clients that I tell them to put little Post-its on their fridge, to be like, I'm triggered and I have like, what should I do? Oh yeah, these are the things that I could do, and that way, because you're not going to be able to think. So having like a pre-plan could be helpful. And like I said, everybody's different. So really talking to people what works best. Yeah, that's how I would approach it.
I think also if we just go back to like the stress response, the different categories of stress responses, right? So we've got the fight, flight, freeze, and fawn. And I think they added one more, but I mean, I think this is a pretty good basis of those four.
Wait, what's fawn? What's
fawn is like pleasing, fixing.
Oh,
right?
I had not heard that one.
Fawn is
Interesting.
like, it's like, I'm sorry, forget it, don't worry about it, I'll take care of it, it's okay. That is what you'll see, right? So I think if you're in a relationship, right, and either you or you're seeing any of these like four behaviors happening, right? What that means is that the situation has escalated to the point of somebody like trying to, smooth over something that feels really scary and overwhelming. So you've got fight, right? Escalation in the sense of yelling or blaming or, name calling or something worse, right? Like, and hopefully not. And then we have flight, which is forget it and like, I'm out. Elvis has left the building. We've got freeze, which can be like shut down. Like maybe you went to go talk to your partner and they responded and that's whatever the response was, it just didn't, um, you felt maybe dismissed or it wasn't received. And the response is just complete shutdown. I can't look at you. I have nothing to say. I don't know what to say, right? That's an indication right there that okay, my nervous system is dysregulated. I need to pause. I need to think about what I'm feeling. I need a minute. And then fawn, right? If you jump or your partner's jumping right to fixing it or pleasing, that could be a nervous system like sense of like, let's just get back to normal, right? Because this is too uncomfortable. So if you are seeing any of those behaviors in yourself or in your partner as you're trying to communicate a concern, I like to keep it simple. A plan ahead of is great. And part of that plan could truly be pause. That's it. And if it's an agreed upon understanding of like whenever we get into it and we start talking and one of us is escalating where we're feeling uncomfortable, pause means we're going to just table it. The tricky part is, and this is where we get caught up sometimes. Sometimes it's the case where one of us needs to hit the pause button and the other person is really struggling to hit the pause button. No, 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 no. We got to fix this now. Right? That's a stress response in and of itself, but we have to agree that we're going to try our best to hit the pause button and also respect that our partner needs that time to calm down, right? It can feel like you're being abandoned in that scenario to deal with whatever you're feeling on your own, but knowing like that's not what's happening. My partner can't be there for me well. They are dysregulated. So they need that break in order to be with me through this discomfort that we're having in our relationship. So the other aspect is like sometimes we hit the pause button and then we don't come back to it. We have to come back to the table and we have to try to have the conversation again, even if it means we're going to hit the pause button 10 seconds in again. We have to come back and attempt the repair. And we may not even reach the solution right away, but we do have to come back to the table.
So would you say that the fawn experience, does that look like being low maintenance or just like smoothing things over and I know like you're not always in the fawn response, but like I'm thinking about myself, that's how I was in my marriage. I was just I took pride in being low maintenance, right? Not making a fuss, not making waves, just smoothing things over, just taking care of things, handling it, whatever. Well, guess what? You can't do that your whole life. And so that what led to eventually my divorce, because when I hit my 40s, I started having a voice and I started speaking up and I started not being so agreeable and not being so low maintenance. And then my ex-husband was like, "What the hell? I married this really low maintenance, chill girl, and who are you?" So would that be considered a trauma response, like kind of approaching relationships in that way? Is that a trauma response?
Well, it could be. I don't want to say yes. I don't know all of the information, right? But it can be, right? People pleasing and fixing is it can be a matter of like, I don't want to fight. I don't want you to be unhappy with me, right? Which could sometimes be like, driven by, I don't want you to leave. Right? I don't wanna be alone, right? Which is a lot of the time from little kid stuff, like maybe you have been alone, right? Or maybe there were experiences where you spoke up and, like, it caused an uproar and everybody fought and then went to separate quarters and we didn't talk about it and everybody was upset, like so I don't wanna say it for you, in your case, yes. I feel like there's probably a little bit more context that would be helpful, but it could be, I guess, is what I would wanna say, right? And sometimes the desire to fix is a little bit different though. The desire to fix could be more it's really uncomfortable to see you upset And it makes me upset when you're upset. And I don't want to feel upset because that's too uncomfortable or overwhelming or scary. And I don't know what to do in that space when I'm upset. So I can't see it in you, right? So that could be a tolerance, of emotion.
And I was just going to add that with women, I mean, we've been socialized to use fawning as a way to kind of keep safe. So it is more common for women to use fawning as a way to kind of appease people or just make the situation better. So it's, it's one of those, like, is it society like bringing us up in this way, or is it a trauma response? I mean, I could say it's maybe a little bit of both. And, it's not uncommon.
Yeah. Alex, that's a
Thank
good
you.
point. And how many of us as women, right? Like we're told, I'm going to curse. I hope that's okay. We're told,
Yeah, on this podcast.
how many of us have been told, don't be a bitch,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's, I think, part of the socialization piece too, is like, yeah, be a good girl. Don't say anything. Don't be a bitch. And my whole take on that is like, no, be a bitch. Be a bitch. That's what they're afraid of. Be a bitch.
Mhm.
Yeah, I
So-
think I got the double whammy because I got, like I said earlier, you were not supposed to be in conflict. Conflict was dangerous. You definitely don't show anger. You don't want anybody to be angry. I don't want people to be disappointed with me. That was a big one. Yeah, and then I have the socialization. So it was like, yeah, when I hit my 40s and by the way, after doing a shit ton of my own personal growth work, and then I could start to step back and just recognize, oh, this doesn't feel good anymore at all. Like, this is not working for me at all. And yeah, like I said, people had a hard time with it. And Alex, I appreciate you saying what you said, because it's like, I don't want women to feel like whatever it is they're dealing with, or however they're functioning or not functioning well in their relationships, we're all works in progress. I think you both touched on that, and it's okay to look at this stuff and to be like, you know what, I need to look at this, and whether it's see a therapist, or learn meditation or yoga or something else. But I think to just not be afraid to look at it and not make it mean anything about us. Okay, quick pause. Have we talked about the Pod Squad lately?
Oh, the Pod Squad. You mean our email list /VIP lounge /digital wine club?
Exactly. So listeners, if you're not on it yet, you're basically making life harder for yourself when it comes to podcasts.
Like trying to scroll for show notes while speed walking on a treadmill. Wait, what was that link again? Oh, no. Grab the side rails.
Or pulling up that book we mentioned while you're in the Starbucks line and then realizing everybody else moved up 3 cars and now you're that woman.
We've all been there. That's why we made the Pod Squad. You'll get new episode alerts every week with direct links. Easy to listen, easy to share.
And show notes straight to your inbox. So when we drop a life-changing product, book, hot tip, or yummy new drink, you're not rummaging through your memory like a woman searching for her reading glasses when they're on top of her head.
It's organized, it's helpful, it's for you, babes.
So join the Pod Squad. The link is in the show notes. Just tap it.
Snacks, sarcasm, solidarity,
and obviously fighting the patriarchy.
We write at dawn. So I love how this podcast always like Karen and I always like, so asking for a friend, right? And we get our little thing in there, right? So it's interesting because, so long story short with me, like I definitely had some of those fawning tendencies for sure for a long time. And now I feel like I've got done a complete 180 and I put up with no shit. And it's sometimes my kids will be like, okay, settle down, mom. I've definitely turned into something different. And I'm obviously, I'm a little sensitive about this because I may or may not have been recently told in a professional capacity that I need to, shall we say, dim my light. So I know I'll just leave it there. So it's a little different when you're handling things in a professional capacity. That's another story for another podcast. But I think that it brings up a point in terms of compromise versus abandoning who you are, right? Now, in my particular journey, I did the 180, right? It doesn't always have to be that way. People are on different journeys. But it brings up a question for me, what is just compromising to keep the relationship going in a healthy way, and what is I'm abandoning who I am to make this relationship work, which is clearly a toxic response. And I know I'm overgeneralizing, but I think if you can give listeners kind of some ideas about what to look for, Alex, you wanna start us off?
Yeah. So, I think it's important for us to have like our own boundaries for ourselves, like to be like, this is something I will do, this is something I won't do. And, and what am I okay with, like meeting someone halfway? Because I think that that's how you get to compromise, like understanding like what you're okay with, not necessarily agree on it, but okay with, and like the difference between accepting something and respect and like agreeing with it, right? Like understanding all those differences so that you can compromise with somebody. Knowing, you know, what your triggers are, understanding like what your likes and dislikes are. So basically really giving a deep dive on who you are, like can help you when it comes to being in a relationship and trying to negotiate whatever it is that you need to negotiate. And, there's many times where I know that I've walked away being like, you know what? I don't agree. And I don't think we can come to a compromise. And we leave it at that, you know? Now, we can table it for a while and then come back to it and maybe see if we can come to a different place. But it's okay to walk away and not have to come up with an agreement or a compromise or anything, and being okay with that. Because I think, especially as women, once again, we're taught to like be pleasing and trying to make sure everybody is okay. So we have this sometimes compulsion to be like, no, we need to reach a compromise. We need to reach an agreement. And it's funny, Lisa, like, I don't know, the past few years, I've been like, I don't care. Like, so if I don't,
Bye.
if I don't, like, I'll quit because I want my peace of mind.
Mhm.
And to me, that's more important now than ever. Before I would be willing to compromise that to please somebody else. And now I don't. Like, I just can't anymore because the toll that it has on me,
Yep.
I just don't want to pay that anymore. So, that is important, like the boundaries that I have for myself, and to make sure that I don't, compromise that for anybody else is important. Now, if you're talking about a compromise between like your partner, like we're going to compromise on doing this because you're not going to get your way, I'm not going to get my way. So that's a little different of a story. Like depending on what it is and whether, I see something good coming out of it, then I will compromise with like my partner or even my son or my daughter or, somebody close to me. But it also really depends on who that person is in my life that I'm willing to provide that. So yeah, I mean, I think our lives are not that long, and making sure that we get our needs met is important and that we have the type of relationships that we want and we need is also important. So I know that the folks around me are not going to ask me to do something that it goes against who I am or is going to hurt, you know. Yeah, that's a big part of it too.
Lisa, you bring up a really good point though too, is like sometimes in our healing journey, right, when we gain insight, what can happen is like a switch in a way kind of goes off where it's like, I've been doing that this whole time. Were you fucking kidding me? No, never again. Never again. Right.
And
So
I'm
now,
out.
yes, we go to the other end of the spectrum and we're like, I'm going to make sure of it. Right. No way. I'm never setting myself up for that. Right. So it's common. Right. And I think when it happens, it's a sense of like, okay, this new space or this new realization, it still feels a little scary, essentially. Right. So, and if I can give you a metaphor to kind of like think about compromise or even just like if this happens to you, it's like, if you imagine, and maybe I spoke to this the last time I was here, I don't remember, but if you could imagine that, like, you know, you belong to you, right? Before you belonged to anybody else in the world, right? And so if you consider that you are like your home, you get to decide who comes in your home, how far they're allowed to come in, what they're allowed to do there, what the exchange is while they're there. And you also get to have locks on your front door, right? Like if we don't have locks, then yes, people are going to come in and go through our fridge and eat our food and, keep, I don't know, right?
Our
Like, so
teenage
you
sons.
make a mess and not clean up after themselves, whatever it is, right? But we get to decide what coming into our home looks like, right? What the expectations are. And it's our job to, uphold those things, right? So if you maybe what one end of the spectrum was like, okay, I'm doors open, come in, like you're welcome, to I'm never letting anybody in ever again, right? So we want to be somewhere in the middle. And in the middle is that, okay, what's happening in this? If you're coming in, how long are you staying? What's your purpose for being here? What's the exchange? And that's with compromise, is that it should be an exchange that feels safe, right? That feels like I'm not giving up all the food in my fridge for nothing, right? I'm not depleted from giving you what you're asking for. In fact, it's helpful in some way, shape, or form.
Because a lot of times what'll happen is if like a couple does not like they don't go to couples therapy or they're not working on the relationship actively, together, maybe one person is, or maybe one person starts to, read some, self-development books or whatever it is. And then they start getting a little more self-awareness than their partner. I mean, is it possible to really facilitate or to do healing within a relationship if not, but if both partners are not kind of looking at that? Alex, what do you think?
I think it is, but it's always good for the partner that's not to eventually, get on the wagon kind of deal. I think for a start, yes, but it also really depends on where the other partner is. I know from my personal experience, like my partner was way more well adjusted than I was, so it it's okay. He lagged behind a little bit, but now he's kind of a more on board and he understands things and he's read and, done more stuff to understand like what it is that I go through when I get triggered. But, at the beginning, I didn't really, it wasn't necessarily needed because I was still kind of finding my footing. But as I became further along in the journey, I needed him to understand things without me having to explain them. And that was because it was taxing on my end to have to constantly be explaining why I was having these certain reactions. So, yeah, I would say to a certain extent, it's okay, but eventually, depending on where the person is, the partner needs to be somewhat knowledgeable of what the other person's going through. Obviously, they don't have to be therapists. They just have to understand that it's something difficult that they're trying to process and that sometimes they're not going to be themselves or sometimes they're going to be exhausted or sometimes they'll be triggered, because, this is work. Like it is work. You do get tired after you're done. It's not just like, oh, you're just talking to someone. No, it's a process.
Yeah. And I'm glad you brought that up too about like how it is a lot of emotional work for the partner who is maybe a little bit further along. And I've experienced this with my partner, Tony, and luckily he's very open. I mean, it takes a while because he likes to flee. I want to say flee. What's the one where you run away?
Yeah.
Is it flee?
Flight.
There it is. Flight.
Flee, flight, flew.
Yeah. And so, and it took me a while to realize what was going on, like to realize what was happening with me, what was happening with him. And then I could kind of, explain, hey, I think this is what's happening. And then we could talk about it. But it does feel like just because somebody's further along on the journey, it's not necessarily always their responsibility. It's like there has to be a sense of at least openness, I think, on the other person's part to be willing to look at it, right? Or else then, yeah, I don't know. What do you think, Alyssa? Anything you want to add?
Yeah. I mean, I see it. My specialty is relationships, right? So I have clients that come to me for a myriad of different reasons, whether it's childhood trauma, whether it's couples counseling, parenting, or individual, and I'm struggling with my relationship or relationships, right? And it's a very common scenario where people are not happy in their relationships and they want to do couples counseling, but their partner's not into it. Right. And I say not into it, but really it's more a matter of, I don't feel safe enough to do that with you yet, right? Or I'm ambivalent about what I want, and admitting that is, or saying that out loud, or going there puts me in that state of having to say that, and I'm not ready to, right? Like couples counseling is it's a big ask because here we are, we're in the fire together, but now with another person who's going to kind of reflect back what's happening in our relationship. So it can be, in and of itself, we're no longer acting like things aren't on fire when we go to couples counseling, right? So it can take a little bit. I think to answer your question, it's like going back to my house metaphor is like everybody, we're all allowed to have locks on our doors, and we have our locks on our doors for reasons. And so when someone's door is locked to going to couples counseling, there's a reason. And, in that, so we're going to therapy in general, right? There's a reason. And I think we can have compassion for that, like even if we don't know what the reason is just yet. So a relationship can improve with one person going to therapy because what's going to happen is you're going to model maybe a more grounded response, right? When things are escalating, you might be more, calm. You might be embodying being calm, right? And that your partner might still be, acting in the same way that they always have been, but they're going to be received differently, right? Or you now have the ability to regulate your own emotions. And so because you are more regulated, your partner is now, you're almost like you're co-regulating with your partner, whether they realize it or not, because they're not getting the same reaction out of you. So you can be the model for the kind of behavior that you're going to allow. And you can set a boundary, you can set boundaries for the things that you are no longer going to accept. So I think relationships can improve, with one person going to counseling, as long as we're also realizing like in those scenarios, we can't control the partner and what might happen. Sure, we can make things sound fluffy and pretty and use I feel statements. But if we're holding on to, I'm here because I want, my partner to change, I don't know how realistic that is, right? I'm here because I want to show up, calmer, more patient, more grounded in my life. That's a great goal, right? And then that can spill out into your relationship.
This has been such an amazing episode. I knew it would be. You guys both always come with such great insight, and I just appreciate it. And I know Lisa does too. And I know our listeners do. So if there is one thing that each of you want our listeners to walk away with, what would it be?
I think I want to go back to what I said in the beginning about resilience. Like we always talk about trauma as like the bad thing that happened to you, this thing, but we don't look at also that growth, right? That empowerment, that the good things that also come out. So, you survived the trauma. That's amazing to me. And I want to remind people of that you were able to figure it out. And sometimes at a very, very, very young age. And that is amazing. And if there's healing that you need to do, you're worth it because, you survived and you're amazing. So that's one of my biggest takeaways when folks tell me that, when they have this shame because this thing happened to them, I always try to remind them that they've survived it and that they're amazing, especially because they're sitting in front of me and they've taken those steps, right, to heal. So I just want to remind people of that.
Alyssa, what do you think?
So I'm going to take it to the relationship side of things because Alex did a great job with, resilience and empowerment and healing that can happen with trauma and giving yourself grace. So I'm going to leave one sentence, right? And that's self-sacrifice is not a prerequisite for love, compassion, or empathy.
Just letting that one sink in.
Thank you both so much. We appreciate you so, so much and the wisdom that you bring to our listeners and also just the love. Like both of you are just so open-hearted and compassionate. And I think that's one of the reasons that we love having you on the show. not only because you have a lot of mic drop moments that I think are good for both Lisa and me and our listeners.
So I think we kind of dropped your information in the last episode, but Alex, do you want to tell listeners where they can find you? And I know that you specifically work in our town, so I don't think it's a kind of situation where people could work with you directly, but how can they find you?
Well, I mean, I am licensed in Oregon, so if you live in Oregon, you can work with me. I have my website, which has a really long name, so it's probably if you just post it. And my practice is called Con Corazon Mental Health Services, which means with heart. And I mostly work with BIPOC folks, but I'm also a Spanish speaker, so I work with a lot of Spanish-speaking clients. And yeah, I do a lot of trauma work, and I do individuals. I don't do couples. I actually have a lot of respect for you, Alyssa, to do couples because that's intense. But yeah, I do enjoy what I do, and I opened my practice because I wanted to give space for folks like myself to work with someone that is like themselves, that looks like me, and feel safe. And in Oregon, there's not a lot of Spanish-speaking Latina therapists, so
She's one of my besties, and I'm so happy to have her in my life. Alyssa, you want to share where people can find you?
Yeah. So I own and operate a virtual mental health and wellness practice. And right now we have clinicians that are located in Florida, Missouri, New Jersey, New York, and Texas. So we've got 5 states going. And something that makes us, I think, a little bit one, we specialize in relationships and healing trauma, childhood trauma, generational trauma. And one of the ways that we do that is our care does reach mind and body. So if you're a current client with us, part of your care is having access to our wellness services, which include mindfulness and meditation coaching, self-love coaching, physical health and wellness coaching. And then we have some really great like yoga and breath work and recorded meditations. And so we try to make our care holistic and in influencing every part of the system of someone. So, yeah.
Awesome sauce. Well, I bet this episode is going to do as well as all the others. And listeners, if you have questions or things that you think we should have these folks back to talk about, we're always happy to do that. You guys know all the things. Anything you want Drinks with the Girls related can be found at drinkswiththegirlspodcast.com. Join the pod squad, do the things. Karen, do you want to add anything?
No, I think you covered it. I just want to thank you both so much again for joining us. I love having you here, and I know Lisa does, and I know our listeners do. So thank you so much. And cheers.
Everybody. Cheers.